Good. Well, I think the main thing I want to talk about is it says in the thing of new segments, the older you get, the more you realize there's nothing new, but there's an awful lot in nuance. And I suppose the big thing is that rather than, and some of this will apply, we do have 20 peak weeks. That's the various half terms, bank holidays, and obviously the main summer season. But I think the challenge for all of us is the other 32 weeks. And this is something we're presenting to the Local Enterprise Partnership on Wednesday. And tomorrow you'll hear a lot more on the website. You've got a sneak preview of what it looks like there. So the first thing is markets are changing, but they always have and always will. So I think the one thing to say about this is it will always be the same. You've got changing a world after coronavirus. Who would have thought about this stuff when I was in the 1990s of economic development, about video conferencing and all the rest of it, of how natural we are with it. Same with QR codes when they were first invented, nobody knew what they were there for. But we're also getting changes in ethnicity, in disabilities of various sorts, hidden as well as visual, in terms of being able to see it. Obviously LGBT, but also ethnic minorities, and also a very elderly, not normally that happy, but affluent pensioner movement. So things are changing, but they are more nuances. And some of these things would have always been around, something coming back on a sort of resurgence really from many years ago, and other ones maybe truly new, and there are a couple that are truly new. So the first one is, for all marketing people, all of us, is understanding the motivation of what people are seeking. People want a holiday, but why are they having a holiday? And there are lots of different reasons and motivations. And here's just a few. First of all, you have got that interests and passions. That can be cultural tourism, it can be heritage, can be many things driven by television. I know my sister's just been away on a quilting week, actually in Cornwall. But there's pottery throwdown, cookery, all sorts of things, some of those new, some of those there. And then there's the enduring ones, such as water sports, surfing, etc. So there are those passions and interests that drive people. I would say that what's new in those passions and interests will come on later is all about the environment. You got visiting friends and relatives. You've got to reconnect, and that's often not just reconnect in that romantic picture there, but reconnect, you'll see this in terms of business. And then making those lifelong memories. And actually, increasingly, people recharging. So, and just want to travel and see things. And these are only 6, there's a lot more motivations. But I think we've always got to understand those motivations that are driving somebody. So, first one is, and it's not one that we've had an awful lot to do with, there's been a couple of things, and this is probably the most exciting of the new areas, is to do with business and MICE tourism. They're not rodents, that's meetings, incentives, conference and events. And there's been a lot of change that's happened over the last 2 years with the pandemic. The whole thing about the way people undertake their working days. Tomorrow we're seeing people which I far prefer. Today we're on screen. It's a hybrid world. You've got some people never go back to an office again. Some people are on a hybrid, only go into the office once or twice a week. And that actually gives opportunities for us down in Cornwall. The first one is the whole issue around business planning. If you think about it, most businesses start to do their planning in the autumn all the way through to the spring, so perfect for us. So why do they need to get away? Well, firstly, they really haven't had an awful lot of time together. Any physical time together is quite limited, and also headspace. I think might not be the only person, but the amount of communication now, emails and everything else going on, doesn't give people a headspace to think about their job. And there's bandwidth, even the capacity in time. And that should say, not too out, should say time out. That sort of idea of taking time, looking at it, the old business advisors saying, oh, spend time on the business, not in the business. And boy, over the last month or 3, have I been in the business too much and not on the business. And it has meant that many people don't actually get together much as a team, but they do need to look at the business. They need to review the strategy and they need to start the business planning for the following year. So if you think about it, you normally review your business in October. You might do business planning in November, budget setting and finalizing in January, February, probably not even March. Perfect time to come down and stay in a hotel or a complex in Cornwall. Get some time together as a team, especially the creatives, the digitals, the professionals, the consultancies, all those people that are just so busy, they haven't got time to think about what they're what they're doing and how they're about to do it, how they're going to work together as a team. And a lot of that will come about from the Bristol area, the M4 corridor, Thames Valley in London, as well as other places. So you've got to understand that, people need to do that. They probably haven't got a boardroom anymore, and they might well have normally gone to a hotel in Reading or in Bristol. Why not come down, take 2 days, combine it with reconnecting as a team as much as the business? The next one, and these can go together, is that team building. Again, people have been very distant. I think all of us can end up in smaller teams or even a team of one, and we need to work as teams. People work best together. So that thing of bringing people down, not the old type of corporate team building. Hopefully none of you have suffered. I suffered. It's almost the guy who watched too much Blue Peter. This is more fun things to do, creative things to do, maybe environmental things to do. It's about being different. It's about working together as a team, but actually achieving something or doing something, not, as I said, not those boring corporate team buildings. And again, a lot of the same things, a lot of the younger team businesses, a lot of creative, digital, same area. And you could almost combine the two things of business planning and team building. Come back for 2 or 3 days, maybe in October, early November, and maybe back down again for late January, February, when we want them. And then don't forget, and we're starting to pick this up as incentive tourism, and it's to reward and to motivate. And these are larger businesses, the corporates. There was the Nando's European conference here a few years ago. And other ones, it's about team performance bonuses. And we're starting to really work with Visit England and Visit Britain on this, is we're picking up even from America interest in having breaks in Cornwall as an incentive. And they are not in the main season for obvious reasons. I'm just going to let somebody in when I find my mouse. There we go. And again, these can be medium corporates, UK and European. And again, normal ones are the corporate structure in that lower part of the UK, but one that we need to take seriously. And then generally conference and events. It's about sales, communication, education. Again, it says medium corporate. But I think where we've got to look at it is where it's best matched into Cornwall, renewables, mining, space, but also digital, creative and tourism, as well as marketing. And again, I think these are probably smaller conferences. You're talking, maybe 100 people, maybe even less, and maybe quite specialized, but we need to get into that space as well. And I think people will be interested in going away from the major events places to somewhere different. It goes back to that blue sky, that creativity, being somewhere different, and we can offer that. So we won't be going up against the conventional places, but we will want to push more in what is euphemistically known as the MICE market. So that's about business tourism, and I think there's a lot in there that we could actually go for, particularly with young dynamic companies. They don't want to do the boring things of the old. They've still got to do the business processes. They've still got to work together as a team. They still need to bring their key account managers and account holders together. And why not do it in Cornwall? Now we move on to what's changing in the world. I should have gone back really if I knew how to do that. But the first thing I want to talk about is people are changing. There are new opportunities coming out of this. One of these ones is the digital nomads, maybe more for self-catering this. These are people who can actually work anywhere. And they might have to go to London a couple of times. They're probably renters. They're probably interested in a decent time, maybe only down here for 2 to 4 weeks, maybe even 3 or 4 months, but we've got capacity in the winter and shoulder seasons to engage with this group of new people, often consultants, but also mainly in the digital and creative. They're freelancers. They're not tied to any particular area. And it's a great place to be creative in Cornwall in the winter. Then you've got, I prefer the holiday because I've got a wicked sense of humour, the workation. Again, if you look at people that are now stuck at home in their four walls for a lot of the time, then the issue for them is all about, I've actually got fed up with these four walls. I'm lucky enough to live 10 minutes away from work. I can come into the office. I prefer being in the office. I've spent too long over the last 2 years. If I was probably commuting like I used to, 50 miles, I'd probably be a lot more at home. So it's not even a choice. And a lot of people in the Thames Valley will be working a lot at home, and they need breaks. You know, that four walls is going to get to them or get to their family and everything else. But breaks in the winter with lots of business commitments, can't really take it. But actually you can mainly have a lot of holiday with some work. You can make that critical meeting. You can stay on top of your emails. And again, that whole Southern England corridor, but in fact, anywhere really. But I think when you think about it, it's really lovely today with the light evenings tonight. It's a lovely weekend, but hasn't it felt like a long, dark winter? So breaking that up, particularly if you're stuck in the spare bedroom or a shed in the bottom of the garden or wherever, for people around the Bristol and the Thames corridor, the Readings, all of those, I think that little couple of breaks or one break, maybe only for 3 nights, maybe for less, is a real sales thing we can push. And the technology has proved to the boss that you can do it. You know, I've got to present to the LEP board. It's 20 minutes presentation on Wednesday plus questions. I've also been invited to take case in a high level DCMS thing on the visitor economy and future strategies. I'm in Newcastle. I can get to Newcastle. I can do the LEP meeting in the morning and still make the 24-hour event after that. I wouldn't have thought of doing that 2 years ago. It would have been one or the other. And that's not even a holiday, it's all work, but it hopefully gives you the flavour. A lot more flexibility. Love you, but need time with my friends. This is one, you know, and maybe love you equals the children, might equal the partner. But there is a thing about actually being able to get away. Again, if you've got 2 people working at home, you know, for all those with children, that hell of home tutoring while both working at home, people are losing their sanctuary by working at home. Even hybrid working, you lose the sanctuary of your home. Sometimes getting maybe a bit too much together time, and it can apply to male or female. It's just the picture I chose, but it's about just having some time away, just to connect with others, but also come back refreshed and recharged, and then reconnect with your loved ones. So that's a lot about the changing issues around what people are faced with. And I would say, just think of the way work has changed in the last 2 years on those first couple of big categories. But the other one is, I don't know why this bloke's got 3 women looking over his shoulder, but that's another issue. Probably because it's probably telling him what to do, because he's probably looking as though he's struggling. The aging population, you know, I'm in my 60s. Don't all shout at once, you don't look it. I'm in my 60s. I know an awful lot of people, especially down the boatyard, in their 70s. They're not worrying so much about the cost of living. You know, they're more worried about how many seasons they've got left. So we have got, not all, but we have got the richest generation ever, the baby boomers. There'll never be another generation like it, I don't think, in the UK. They've benefited from stealing all your money. By having huge equity in their properties that you guys are having to pay for in massive mortgages. They often haven't got children with student loans, and they've actually got their children set up in houses years ago, so they don't have to worry about being the bank of mum and dad. So they're a very affluent market, very grumpy as well a lot of the time. That's another issue. So that's their motivation, is the need to live life to the full. This isn't your coach group going home, watching whatever's on in the afternoon. I was taking a mickey at my retired brother in the Chase or whatever, Tipping Point he's always watching, having his ginger nuts. He takes 6 holidays a year. He goes skiing, goes sailing, goes other things when he's not watching TV in the afternoon having ginger nuts. And these guys want to do it, but I tell you what, they are worried about when they're going to die. I end up pleasure with my brother and sister every time they buy a new coat, saying, is it really worth it at your age? So they're interested in wellness, health. They particularly want to be activities and experiences. You'll see them on motorbikes, you'll see them doing skiing. You'll see these are people who still think they're 45. But they do have lots of other interests, intellectual interests, heritage, arts and culture, lots of them, and they can take multiple breaks. But the other thing with this group, looking at this lot floating in the swimming pool, is they're starting to get more health issues. They're probably starting to cut down the amount of time they want to go abroad. I should say health, not Heath. I must do better with my eyesight. That's what happens when you get old. Again, a lot probably in the wider southwest, I think, for these short breaks. They can go away with their friends. They can do things. They need to, particularly in the other 32 weeks when we're cost effective, have that time. But they want to do things. These are not the 70-year-olds we had 10 years ago, and certainly not the ones 20 years ago. Inside, like my father said, you fix at about 35. It's only when you try to do things you realize your age. And the big one that Cornwall is pretty bad at, and one that we want to do a lot of product development on, is accessibility. And I put wobbly hips and knees. I think I use this graphic because there's lots of things in that group that has to do with accessibility. Yes, there's one person with a wheelchair. You haven't got a clue what everybody else has got. It can be dementia or autism, sight, hearing, just aging population, again spelled wrong. And the wobbly hips, people who need to know where you can walk. National Trust were telling me last week they're doing something with Rutland Steps to get a better access point. Same with gardens. These are people that haven't got anything recognised as a mobility issue, but the old hips and the knees aren't as good as they want. But all those other areas of mental well-being, mental health, all sorts of hidden issues. And it's a big market because a lot of these people do not want to go abroad, and they will bring somebody else with them, often the four-legged dog as well. So we're going to be doing quite a bit on accessibility, hopefully trying to get access to money from the next round of funds to make Cornwall far more accessible in this broader sense of all these potential markets. And the whole emerging one is this whole thing around eco-conservation, nature tourism. I haven't really got a fancy word for it. This is your spring watch on your RSPB market. The RSPB, I think, is the biggest membership organisation in the UK. And this is growing interest. It's the country file. It's what was the coast people. It's all this thing around wildlife. How do you do it? How can I be more wildlife friendly? How can I be more supportive of nature? I'm to learn a lot more about what I can do. They certainly want to be working with local experts, and they want real experiences. And yes, some of it is about conservation. We had conservation volunteers for years, but this goes a bit deeper into it. And it's not just about nature. It is about small and authentic experiences. And I've put plus gardens and attractions, but we've got great gardens and attractions that are part of this in terms of the understanding of the rewilding and the regeneration of nature and the habitats. And as I said, I think the main one I put in here everywhere, for those who remember Simon Bradley, it's about sight doing, not sightseeing. Going back to that older market, that was all about going somewhere and looking. My generation and the people who are older than me, they still want to carry on doing things and then have a cup of tea and a ginger nut. And don't forget the four-legged friends. I know it's going to be controversial, but it's time with the loved ones, 2 and 4 legs. Again, I think sometimes, our thing is, particularly in the winter, there's no mud on a beach. Well, maybe there are on the odd one, but most of our beaches there aren't. So if you think you're going to go away to have a break with your loved one and the dog, or the family and the dog, and you go to the Cotswolds or the New Forest in the winter, it's muddy. We don't, we have sand. And the ownership of dogs has grown dramatically during the pandemic, and also with the increased home working. So having a break also does include the dog. So as I said, and certainly in the winter, not a problem, particularly if they bring responsible owners with them. And we had this discussion this morning, but I think particularly at all times of the year now, we should look at this multi-gen. They've got the money. They're only going to die soon, in the next 10, 20 years. They want to spend more time with their loved ones, the offspring, the grandchildren, and that's been rammed home during lockdown. And again, no mud on the beach. You can have as much fun on the beach, as you can, during the summer. You see people, the kids are running. Yesterday, they were all over the beach. And again, that wider area. So many of these things I'm talking about, they're variations on a theme. When it said new segments, it's nuances. Some are brand new, like digital nomads and workations or holidays, but some are just variations. But those people who denied seeing their grandchildren will also see their children having financial challenges with the cost of living. One way they can help their children to have a break by paying for it, or the bulk of it anyway, and also they get time with their grandchildren. And also maybe at times the under fives, why not grandparents taking the under fives away for a short break? Because it's a great thing to do to give your kids a break. And last but not least, and it is not least, we did have Explore GB last week. There is a tremendous amount of interest in Cornwall from the free independent traveller and the very small group. And I'm talking about group sizes of 2 to 4 to no more than 6, 7, 8 rooms, sometimes 10 rooms, but mainly small. The American market is quite strong for us. I was interested in looking for DevKey this morning. We've seen that pick up in Canada. They want to fly in, they'll pay a driver guide to 250, 300, 350 a day. They will spend over 200 on a room. So they are different, particularly on the American, Canadian, Australian, lesser extent the German market, but the Italians are there. And these guys are just looking for hotels and accommodation, including self-catering for the German and Netherlands, that are willing to work with the travel trade. And these are people who are supporting travel agents in like Germany and travel consultants in America. This isn't your massive groups. Nobody we had last week, and Abby Steele led on all of this, and she had most of them. We didn't have one large operator. We had an inquiry the week before, went in 75 rooms in at least a 3 or 4 star hotel for 75 quid a night. So we know where he can go. It's called Torquay. But these are very valuable ones. So if you are interested in having those conversations with the intermediaries, the travel trade consultants, email Abby at visitcornwall.com. So there we are. I've waffled for another 25 minutes, you poor devils. What I hope I've given is an insight in that as things get tight and costs go up in businesses and we need the customers, I don't worry about the popular weeks. My worry is the other 32 weeks from Visit Cornwall's perspective, and every one of those beds we can keep full of, otherwise be empty, is a lot of money onto the bottom line for the benefit of businesses as well as Cornwall. So with that, I will shut up and I will stop sharing and take any questions. You've got a question there on incentive tourism. Yes, we're engaging with Visit England now and certainly they will be sending through all the inquiries. We've already had 2 this year. They were far too big for us to cope with. They were, I'm talking about people wanting 250 rooms, and we did try some holiday resorts, but it just didn't work out because of all the bounce bookings and forward bookings. So we are going back to, say, the smaller groups. So thanks for that, Jackie. Any other questions? So I will sum up, because another slide I should have put in is, well, Belle, how come you're so confident you can do things outside the season? And I just want to finish off because the world's changed with digitization. The world is changing because of the whole issue around changing dynamics of demography, personal relationships, a re-evaluation of what's important in life post-pandemic and even the war. And I just seen circular economy. And of course, those, one of the things we're pushing for is a multi-year campaign on Cornwall out of season, Cornwall for all seasons, to do the winter. And that circular economy is for every £1 spent by a visitor, just under 20 pence goes into the high street, and just over 20 pence goes in food and drink. So it's not just about us in the core business of tourism. It's about helping Cornwall get bigger and faster, not faster, bigger outside the main season, more valuable to the economy, growing more all year round jobs and increasing profits. So win, 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 if that's how many wins you've got to have.